Yo. Welcome, America, Canada, Australia, Great Britain, and even India, and the rest of the world, to Issues and Answers on the WCEG network. We're on at WCEGtalkradio.com. If you're on the internet, just click the live stream after you reach that WCEGtalkradio.com, or you can watch us live on your smart TV, YouTube, WCEG Network. I'm Norman Carter, your show host for Issues and Answer, and I'll be your host for the next 1 to 2 hours. We're the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Join the conversation, call in or Skype at 1-678-619-1402. Repeat, that's 1-678-619-1402. That can be call in or on Skype. Ask your questions, make your comments, voice your concerns. Let us hear from you at 1-678-619-1402. And as I like to say, that the topics and opinions of those of your host, Norman Carter, and our guest, not the WCEG network. We thank you for your continued support. We are speaking life into the community, the world community, discussing those concerns which affect the quality of our lives. Among the topics we hope to discuss today are voter suppression versus voter engagement, Census America, and domestic violence. As always, I encourage you to make your questions or comments and concerns known to us by calling in at 1-678-619-1402 via phone or Skype. My special guest today is Reverend Paula L. Christian-Stallworth. Reverend Christian-Stallworth is a licensed professional counselor with over 20 years of experience. In addition, she is the assistant pastor at Cornerstone Church of Norris Lake, which is located in the southeastern section of Gwinnett County. A little disclaimer, I'm also a member of Cornerstone Church. She is going to help us navigate through this social dilemma known as domestic violence. She is headquartered in Conyers, Georgia, where Reverend Stallworth is the owner and CEO of Listening Ear LLC in Conyers, Georgia. She is a certified professional counselor supervisor, certified alcohol and drug counselor, certified co-occurring disorders specialist, certified juvenile sex offender counselor, premarital marriage counseling, grief counseling, parenting, family violence, and more. I'm running out of breath. At her counseling center for mental and emotional wellness, treating individuals, families, and groups in prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery, specializing in training and consulting and treatment. She has a Doctor of Divinity degree from American University, a counseling and psychology degree from Argosy University. She has a Master of Divinity in Christian Education and Pastoral Care Counseling from the Interdenominational Theological Center. Reverend Stallworth, welcome to Issues and Answers.
Thank you, Norman. It's indeed an honor to be here speaking life into the community on the topic of domestic violence.
We are glad to have you. And Reverend Stallworth, I have nearly a 30-year background in law enforcement. And I've seen a lot of domestic violence. Still, I was surprised that every 9 seconds, a woman in the United States is being assaulted or beaten. Around the world, 1 in every 3 women has been beaten, coerced into sex, or otherwise abused during her lifetime. It is important to note that 1 in 25 men also are the victims of domestic violence. Most often, the abuser is a member of his or her own family. Reverend Stallworth, are these statistics reflected in your interactions with patients and clients?
Absolutely, that and some.
I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Well, as you well said, it's not just members of our families or men, 25% of men who are being abused. There is also the LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
There is our faith communities.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it's unfortunate on any level, but I believe that we least expect it in the faith community.
Correct.
Unfortunately, with human trafficking, sex trafficking, it's all part of abuse on one level or another.
Amazing. Just absolutely amazing. In law enforcement, even some of the most serious cases of domestic violence, the abused person will not support criminal charges against the abuser. What's the reason for that?
I don't know that there's any one reason. There are multiple reasons. I know that at times it's the children, if there are children involved. Mm-hmm. They don't want their children to grow up without a father. Mm-hmm. They don't want to be left as a single parent. Sometimes it's the financial provision that their abuser provides. Even though in many cases they are limited to having their financial needs met based on when and if the abuser is willing to provide whatever is needed. It's not unusual for a victim to have to come to her abuser and ask, beg, plead, and sometimes maybe have to work off whatever monies that are needed.
That's just.
It's a very dismal situation.
I know one of the reasons I wanted to do this program is because once I was shocked by the statistics on domestic abuse, it's obvious that if we don't have people who are listening who are victims of abuse, then we do have people in great numbers who are listening who know of someone in their family, in their neighborhood, some of their friends who are living under this just awful, terrible circumstance.
There are so many directions we could take on this thing because it is an epidemic, if you will. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that your neighbor could be the victim, and your neighbor comes to you and in a need to talk to someone because they are groomed. Victims are groomed. You don't tell anybody what's going on. Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. Many times, at least in the African American culture, that's the way we grew up. Whatever happened in our house, you were not to go out and talk to anybody or tell anybody anything. So when your neighbor comes to you and needs to talk because she or he is battling this whole idea of being abused, and then they come to their pastor to let their pastor know they're being abused, and the direction the pastor gives is go home and submit to your husband.
Yeah, that's when something like that happens, you feel like you're at the end of your road.
What is one to do?
Yeah, that's, and you sort of touched on it. And one of the things I thought about once I began to delve into this topic is about how domestic abuse is socialized. Socialized to the point that we accept it as part of how we live. And I go back to my childhood, and I remember Jackie Gleason and the Honeymooners. And the tagline in that program certainly would not be accepted today on television. And one of his great taglines was looking at his wife whenever he was angry at her and, balling up his fist and saying, "One of these days, Alice,
Yes.
one of these days."
Threats.
Or, "To the moon, Alice, to the moon." That was one. And there were, you can look at the movies that were out during that time where there was a lot of abuse going on. The songs that we grew up with. Some of the songs, Joni Summers, "Johnny Get Angry, Johnny Get Mad," goes on and on and on. Sam Cooke, "Frankie and Johnny." The Bobettes, "I Shot Mr. Lee," which is a whole nother part that we'll probably get into. The newer rap songs where women are constantly being objectified and being referred to as hoes and bees. And as some of you might know, I have written papers on the fact that the first way we get to objectify and begin to dehumanize people is by attaching names to them other than their own names, be it a hoe or bee or in or a host of other names that are not their names, and these names serve to dehumanize and justify all types of abuse.
And unfortunately, what you just going along with what you've already shared, the grooming process for an individual to accept this kind of lifestyle, this kind of behavior, pretty much paralyzes one.
Correct. And that's the idea.
Doomed if you leave and doomed if you don't. And that's the message that is played over and over in their head. If you leave, I will call CPS and you will not be able to take the children. You will not, nobody's going to want you. All of the lies that are played over and over and over again for us to accept. I recently saw the much talked about movie, A Fall from Grace.
Okay.
And many people think of victims of abuse as uneducated, impoverished, not really having a focus or vision for life. However, in that movie, A Fall from Grace, the character Grace Waters is educated. She owns her own home. She's very active in her church community. And she fell for the lines that were fed to her by her abuser. And without giving too much of the movie away, it is worth seeing.
You've heard it. Fall from Grace. A unasked for advertisement, but certainly fitting in with our subject. Just to remind you that you're listening to the WCEG network. This is Issues and Answers with Norman Carter and my special guest, Reverend Paula L. Christian-Stallworth. And Reverend Stallworth, just piggybacking on what you've said, I went to the National Council on National Coalition Against Domestic Violence website, which is available to all of you if you'd like to check it out. And one of the things that we talk about is why it matters. And this piggybacks on what you're saying. I'll read directly from the website. Domestic violence is prevalent in every community and affects all people, regardless of age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, gender, race, religion, or nationality. Physical violence is often accompanied by emotionally abusive and controlling behavior, as much a part of a larger systemic pattern of dominance and control. Domestic violence can result in physical injury, psychological trauma, and even death. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The devastating consequences of domestic violence can cross generations and last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about crossing generations, we're talking about more than just your lifetime.
That's right.
And that's another question I would like to get into is about how does that affect children, the lasting effect on children?
One, they grow up thinking that this is normal.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime a person grows up thinking that physical, verbal, emotional, psychological, sexual, financial, spiritual, any form of abuse is normal, that is a problem. Children grow up, and in many cases, it's easier for them to be groomed and become a victim. It's not unlikely sometimes, and not in every case, that some become abusers to their own families, to their own children. It affects their esteem, so they don't think of themselves oftentimes as someone worth being treated with dignity and respect and being loved, genuinely being loved.
Reverend Stallworth, you several times used the word groomed. That's always a disturbing word for me. I ran into grooming a lot. I learned about that during my police career under very, very, very disgusting circumstances. And as far as this conversation goes with us today, I think that grooming could possibly begin with something as simple as, how would I put this? Subtle threats, subtle words, to see the tolerance of the other person. And then, and I've said this for years, the first slap is the hardest. Once that's accepted, or once that, whatever that, it could be a slap, it could be a sexual assault, it could be just extremely harsh words, or an exceptionally embarrassing moment. Once that bridge is crossed for the first time, and the end result is some sort of acceptance, then that sort of sets the stage for, that's part of the grooming process as I look at it.
Yes, and initially it may not even be a physical first issue. They have, for example, let's say it's Thanksgiving and the intended victim says something that her significant other is very opposed to her having said. When she gets home, he lets it be known he may punch a hole in the wall, go right past her head to put a hole in the wall. The next time you say something like that in front of anybody, I'm going to really let you have it. So from then on, all he has to do is remind her about that Thanksgiving. Remember Thanksgiving.
Yes.
She knows then she's got to stay in check.
It goes back to that control.
Power and control.
Dominance.
I can't allow you to think that you can say what you want to say, go where you want to go, do what you want to do without my permission.
Well, we're talking about a lot of examples of domestic violence. I have a phone number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, a national number, and that's 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. That's the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Write it down. If you don't need it, I'm sure you know someone who does. 1-800-799-SAFE or 1-800-799-7233. They have a online hotline at www.thehehotline.org.
Thank you for that information. In fact, if you call that number, they can direct you to the number you need in your area.
Mm-hmm.
So don't feel that because you live in Indiana that number would not be of help to you. You can call there and they can direct you to the number or a safe place if you need to go find a safe place. This is another issue that I wanted to bring up, and that is many people think, well, why don't they just leave? Oftentimes it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
And one must be very careful about how you leave. It may take planning. It may take weeks or months or days of planning until you have set some things in place so that at the right time, when you get the courage, because sometimes it takes, having courage to do that. You could, because this person, depending on how long they have been under this kind of environment, may not be able to just walk out for fear of, they may have been warned that if you leave, I'll kill your extended family members, I'll kill the children, I'll kill you, you'll never get away, I'll find you wherever you go. Some, especially now, for example, cell phones.
I was going to say, yeah.
Absolutely. So the abuser will make sure that they can control by making sure your cell phone is under their plan.
Okay.
And they can pinpoint wherever you are as long as you have that cell phone.
And I think you also have to watch your social media interactions in those situations.
It's like going what is the term they use when you're witness protection? It's like
you're going underground.
Going underground, taking on a whole new identity. I have worked in a residential center for homeless women and children where there were people there, women there, who had to change their whole identity because the people that they were with had the kind of technical knowledge or in connections with persons within the judicial system that they could find them wherever they went.
I'd like to remind our listeners that we encourage you to call in with your questions or concerns, especially if you're having a problem with domestic abuse or you know someone in your family who's dealing with sexual or domestic violence abuse. Our number is 1-678-619-1402. That's 1-678-619-1402. We encourage you to call in with your questions or concerns, and perhaps we can help to some extent deal with your particular problem. I see the domestic violence. It includes sexual assault, stalking. I've been a victim of that. And it can even evolve into homicide. This is a statistic, national statistic. 1 in 3 murder victims and 1 in 20 male murder victims are killed by intimate partners. 94% of murder-suicide victims are female.
Yes.
72% of all murder-suicides are perpetrated by intimate partners. And a study of intimate partner homicides found 20% of victims were family members, of friends, of the abused partner, neighbors, persons who intervened, law enforcement responders or bystanders. As a former law enforcement officer, I can tell you that one of our greatest fears during my police career was responding to domestic violence calls. Very often, you're in the middle. And one of the things that I've found out is that probably during, after, and maybe before the Super Bowl, which we just got over, has a high volume of domestic violence. I can tell you from my law enforcement career, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, we were loaded with domestic violence calls. Loaded. New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, Christmas Day are high domestic violence days. These are all things that we'd like for all of you to be aware of, and we want you to know that if you are suffering, and I want to underscore suffering in a domestic violence situation, there's help for you. There are people who are ready to help you. Reverend Paula Stallworth is one of those people. She's headquartered in Conyers, but we also gave you the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. They will refer you to a local agency who will help you, who will guide you. This can be life-saving. This is not just a matter of sitting around and you're going to take a blow here and a blow there, and then tomorrow you get a bouquet of roses and it's all over. This is life-threatening. I will tell you, you can only take so many hits upside the head.
Yes. Yes. You know, excuse me. We have people, or we know of people who, while they know they don't want to be where they are,
Mm-hmm.
they don't exactly know where to go. And unfortunately, safe houses are few, are rare. We don't have enough. We don't have enough emergency shelters for battered women and or other victims, especially places where they take women and children. One of the issues with the place that I'm familiar with was that they would not take women with male children. And if they were of a certain age, puberty, adolescence, they definitely couldn't come. So what's a woman to do? What's a mother to do? I'm not turning my son away because, so we all suffer or we don't, you know, not just one or the other, but we're going to be a family, we're going to stay together. Unfortunately, when you asked about the impact on children, children try to make up for the abuse that's going on in the family. Oftentimes the boys will try to be the man of the house. They go through guilt and embarrassment, shame, because they are no match for the abuser. They will oftentimes just wait until they are of age or have grown and can then confront that abuser, which puts their life in danger, as well as the mother. If we're talking about a traditional heterosexual family, the little children, oftentimes the family whole unit may be suffering from PTSD, from trauma-related issues. There is so much. Mental illness is considered a taboo. We don't want to talk about mental illness. However, these kinds of lifestyle environments can be the cause in some situations for mental illness. It doesn't mean you're crazy. I don't even like to use the word crazy. We are made up of mind, body, and spirit. Physiologically, we don't have a problem going to our PCPs or our primary care physicians. And we don't wait till we're sick to go get that wellness check.
Correct.
Amen. We are spiritual beings. In most cases, we believe in something outside ourselves.
Correct.
And we're still a predominantly faith community. In other words, we believe in God.
Correct.
So we believe that spiritually we must maintain a spiritual wellness.
Correct.
There is also a need for mental wellness. So if we're mind, body, and spirit, and we don't have a problem with physiological checkups, we don't have a problem with making sure we get to the house of God so we can be spiritually fed, to maintain a spiritual wellness. It's time that we stop allowing the stigma of mental illness to rob us of becoming more mentally and emotionally well.
Wow. I hope you're listening, folks. This is great info. And what it does is it destigmatizes certain things.
Dr. Jennifer Ashton of Good Morning America was our guest speaker at the Survivors of Suicide Conference, Suicide Prevention Conference. And the phrase that she used was, get your checkup from the neck up. Yes. We have to be very, very intentional about our holistic care, self-care. It's extremely important.
So when someone comes to you with an issue, is there a checklist that you go through with that person? What is that interview process like?
Absolutely. When we get a call into the office for someone who's potentially looking for counseling for one reason or another, depending on what they're coming for, many times it's grief and loss. It can be depression. It can be an adjustment issue within the family or the lifestyle environment. Maybe the job that you've always had is changing. Perhaps you have to relocate because of job changes. And therefore, depending on what a person is coming in for, they may have anxiety. They may be suffering from anxiety.
Okay.
So we do self-assessments. The assessment is not to diagnose. It's to give us an idea of the direction that we need to take.
Okay.
And I will say this too about going to get help for mental wellness. And that is, I tell my clients when they come in initially, I don't assume that because you come in one time that you'll feel comfortable to come in again. Do your homework. If in the course of our initial assessment or 2 or 3 sessions after that, if an individual feels like this is not a good fit, I encourage you, please let me know. I take constructive criticism very well.
Okay.
I'd rather you be in a place where you can get the right help with the right person. It needs to be a good fit.
Absolutely.
It has to be a good fit. So I'd rather not take your money than take your money and you not get what you need.
And I believe that if you're under some sort of medical plan,
yes,
that helps. So please
does.
don't get frightened away.
Oh, absolutely.
By that.
We take the primary private insurances, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Cigna, Aetna, and a few others. We take a couple of the CMOs, Amerigroup and Peach State, as well as pending WellCare. And we also do self-pay. So for those who don't want it on their record, you can come in and pay on your own. If you are employed with a company that has an EAP, which is an Employee Assistance Program, you can check with your Department of Human Services, and they may be able to get you anywhere from 3 to 8 sessions where it's nothing out of your pocket. The EAP pays us directly. Now we take multiplicity of those, but contact your EHR. I'm sorry, electronic health records. I'm thinking. Contact your Department of Human Services to see if there is an EAP program, and if necessary, you can start there. If your condition or your circumstances requires more services than they allow, then we can pick up with your insurance after that. For those who have no insurance, we do have master's level interns that work with us who are being trained and are getting first class education on becoming a mental health professional. And you can see them, some of them pro bono. So we don't turn anybody away who's really interested in coming and are serious about their well-being, their mental well-being.
Very important to know that one of the shackles that might be holding you back from receiving help if you're in a domestic violence situation should not be economic. There are ways to get around that. For several years back in my home city of Philadelphia, I worked with the Office of Inspector General, which oversaw the Department of Public Welfare. And I am sure that all states are set up the same way, where there are state agencies who will guide you if you take the time to look and find it. It may not be your department, they may not be known as the Department of Welfare, it might be DFACS as we have here in Georgia,
Children's Services, yes.
or whatever department that your agency that your state has set up. There's someone there who can designate how you can get funding or even shelter if you're in a domestic violence situation. One of the things that I can reflect on, and it probably affects a lot of people, is the effect of domestic violence on children who may not be the direct target, but are nevertheless recipients indirectly of that abuse. We do have a caller on the line. This is Norman Carter and Paula Stallworth on the line. How can we help you?
Hi, good evening, Mr. Carter, and good evening, Dr. Stallworth.
Good evening.
My name is Leroy, and I have a question for Dr. Paula. The topic here is domestic violence, so I wanted to know if you could please distinguish between domestic violence and intimate partner violence, because some people might believe that domestic violence is specific to married couples.
Thank you, Leroy, for calling and for that very important question, very valid point that you raised. Yes, domestic violence can include your significant other partner. It can include a parent, a sibling. Excuse me. It is not just a intimate partner situation.
Right.
Is that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Because I think a lot of us are ill-informed and may feel, okay, well, I'm not married, and so I don't come under that category and may not know what to do or believe that they are left out. So, yeah, it does answer the question. Yes, it does. Thank you.
And just to piggyback on that question also, because I'm one for statistics, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 59 men in the United States, let me go over that again, 1 in 5 women and 1 in 59 men in the United States is raped during his or her lifetime. 9.4% of women in the United States experience intimate partner, it's not necessarily marriage, intimate partner sexual assault in their lifetimes. So that's a very good question. I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you very much for calling in, Leroy.
Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Same to you. Well. And remind you once again, you're listening to Issues and Answers on the WCEG network. You can access us via computer at WCEGtalkradio.com. Click on the live stream icon and you can get us. And we're also available via YouTube on your smart TV. Just search for WCEG Network. And we encourage all of you to call in at 1-678-619-1402 with your concerns, your questions, and maybe some answers. I'm sure there's some experts out there listening who can provide some insight, not only for us, but for our listeners. Thank you. And I'm looking further on we've sort of touched on this, are the physical and mental effects of domestic violence. One of the things I'm looking at here is victims of intimate partner violence are at an increased risk of contacting HIV or other STIs due to forced intercourse or prolonged exposure to stress. Mm-hmm. That has to be awful. You wake up every day not knowing whether what you do is good enough, and sometimes when you do great, it makes no difference.
That's right.
And that's what and this is my opinion, and I'll ask you because you're the expert. This type of behavior is seldom based on the victim.
No.
It's the driving force is the abuser. This is their way of life. This is their way of interacting. Would that be inaccurate?
It pretty much. It boils down to their belief system. They
Mm-hmm.
believe they're entitled. They believe that it's okay to live and control and use and abuse those with whom they live, those partners that they take on. Oftentimes we live in a world where cohabitation is the norm, mm-hmm. unfortunately. And there are cases where two people decide to shack up. Mm-hmm. One is a person of faith, typically the woman. The man may not be. However, he will use scriptural principles, biblical principles, to take control of his house. I'm the man of the house. You know that's what the Bible says.
Yes.
So you need to let me be the man of the house.
Yes.
You need to submit. Woman, you need to keep silent. The woman is left to take care of the children, keep the house in the order, do the cooking, the washing, taking them to their appointments, sometimes working outside of the home in addition to all of that. And when the head of the house comes home and the dinner is not prepared or prepared correctly, there is reason, excuse to then stir up strife, mm-hmm. create problems. Sometimes it's because they're looking for a reason to leave so they can see Sister Sue around the corner or down across town. So I come in and I create a disturbance because I need to go out without you questioning me.
This is part of the what I call the lowering of self-esteem process, the controlling that comes in with the lowering of self-esteem, and it's horrendous that we have people who use biblical, and I'll put that in quotes, mm-hmm. justification mm-hmm. for their actions.
It's true.
It's just horrendous that you can take a phrase, which I hear often, a woman needs to be humble and closed-mouthed, mm-hmm. and you can take that and run with it, and you see that that becomes cross-cultural. If we're going to talk about religion background, that would cover so many of our, not just our Judeo-Christian religions, but it goes into other religions and other practices yes. also. And it's justified. And you have the point when it becomes socialized, that the socialization is not just part of what the male does, but it generates the acceptance
Keeps the woman
of the
in her
female.
place. Mhm.
Or because what you will hear is, well, you're a woman, this is supposed to happen. Or if you are the, let's put this, I hate to put this, the submissive partner, whatever that may be as far as sexuality goes, then that part of that being in that role is you submit to whatever abuse comes your way, because this is just a part of the way that people interact. And that is not true. This is the 21st century, and the fact that we're holding on to these type of values at this time, when there's help out there.
There's help. The other population that we haven't said much about are our teens. Our teens many of them are caught up. Many of our teens are caught up in domestic violence situations. Boyfriends at school, sneaking into the bedrooms in their homes, teens sneaking out of the house to go meet people they met online. There needs to be a serious, all-out plan to expose, educate our societies on what is a healthy relationship.
We'll be going to a break in just a few minutes, but just piggybacking on what you say, I'm going to jump right on statistics. And this is for your parents listening out there. 1 in 5 teenage girls who have been in a relationship said a boyfriend threatened violence or self-harm if presented with a breakup. That's 1 in 5 teenage girls. You like bigger numbers? 20%. That's a lot of people. That could very well be, if you have 5 girls in your family, 5 teenage girls in your family, one of them could be a victim of domestic abuse. Studies suggest that up to 10 million children witness some form of domestic violence annually. The bad part about that is that of that 10 million, how many of those 10 million children come to believe that this is normalized behavior?
Especially if they've grown up in that environment.
Correct.
Or if there's no father in the home.
Correct. And these are the things that we're talking about. We're talking about some of the causes, and perhaps later we're going to get into resolution.
Yes.
Again, more help. And again, remind you of how you can seek help for domestic violence. This has been an enlightening and informative conversation for me so far. Again, you're listening to the WCEG network. And we're accessed at WCEGtalkradio.com. We're going to be going on a little bit of a break in a few minutes, but we want you to write down our number to start giving us a call back at 1-678-619-1402. Write down your questions. Be prepared to give us a call back with your questions, your concerns, and even your input. We want that. We want your support.
Absolutely.
So please take advantage of that opportunity to call in for us right now at WCEG. We speak life into the community. We are the worldwide community empowerment group seeking to empower you. Thank you for listening. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned.